Alrighty, guys, let me tell you what. Motorsports are awesome, but they're kind of the worst also because they're just so damn expensive, right? And there's a lot of pieces to make it go. Other sports, they're kind of simple. You can play in your backyard. You just get some equipment, you get a ball, whatever, and you can play. Motorsports doesn't work like that. It's really expensive. It's not accessible to, a lot of normal people. And there's so many different levels of motorsport. Well, I've quickly learning that Formula One trumps all of them by a mile in expense, in the amount of work that goes into it, the amount of people, the whole 9 yards. And the fact that they have to go all around the world and take care of this stuff and not lose out on all these crazy investments, I don't even know how they do it. So we're going to look at the insane logistics of Formula One. This is, of course, from Wendover Productions is a channel. This will be linked in the description down below so you can watch the whole video uninterrupted. Let's waste no time. Let's get into this because this is just a fascinating sport every time I turn another page on this. It's crazy.
No sport is as logistically challenging as motorsports. While equipment matters in any sport, in motorsport, the human is only half the athlete. The vehicle is the other half. The performance of a motorsports vehicle is directly tied to having the right components in the right place at the right time, so the logistics are part of the competition. Racing may be a sport, but it's not all fun and games. Teams are businesses that are expected to make money. The most valuable Formula One team, Scuderia Ferrari, is worth over $1.3 billion. This means this team is valued at about as much as tech companies Discord, Bird Rides, or DoorDash. The wealthier teams, like Ferrari, are able to spend more money on transport to bring more equipment and spare parts, which can make the difference between winning and losing when things go wrong. Formula One is by many measures the most international sports competition. Over its 21 yearly races, the team...
Okay, see, let me interrupt. Look at that calendar. I mean, they're literally all over the world. I mean, you could safely say they're everywhere. All the way over here in Asia, all the way down to Australia. This is crazy, guys. Look at all those spots. And they have to transport all this stuff and have everything lined up for the race. Like he said, I don't even know how they begin to do this. It's crazy.
Teams traverse 5 continents with as little as a week between events. A chaotic ballet of trucks, boats, and planes transports this show across the world each year.
I don't know how it gets done.
In Formula One, and despite it taking place worldwide, it is by all measures a European sport. 8 of the 10 teams are registered in and operate out of Europe. Only the Indian and American teams are from elsewhere, although the Indian team is actually based in the UK, while the US team, based in North Carolina, operates a secondary forward base in the UK so that its staff doesn't have to travel all the way back to the US between each of the European races, which in recent years have been held consecutively with a brief interruption of the Canadian Grand Prix in the middle of the season over summer. Thanks to this, the European leg of the season is, compared to the rest, relatively easy logistically because within Europe, you can drive. The cost of shipping by truck is so comparatively low to shipping by plane that teams bring whole buildings with them to European races. These buildings are what are modestly referred to as motorhomes, but can be as large as Red Bull's 3-story structure that includes offices, bars, and a restaurant with a complete kitchen. All of that packs into a number of trucks and can be assembled in less than 2 days.
That's
Along
insanity,
with all the other equipment, including cars, spare parts, and electronics, convoys of dozens of trucks per team crisscross the continent before each European race. Typically, races are held every 2 weekends on Sunday, which gives teams plenty of time to relocate before activity begins on the Thursday before the Grand Prix, but from time to time the schedule is crunched and races take place 2 weekends in a row.
Real quick, this is why Formula One has been such a wild ride. I'm still in the infant stages here, learning about this. But like I said, the more I peel off, it's like this sport is so fascinating, not just because of the race. Like, it's so much more than just turning the race on. All right, let's watch them go around the track. It's so much more than that. It is a competition on so many levels. And I never thought of this, but it is down to even logistics. I mean, you have to make it, think about it, you may laugh, but you have to make it to the track on time. You have to have all your stuff, all your tools, all your staff, all your tires, all that, right? It's just kind of crazy to think about. Logistics is kind of your first step to success. If you have that in order, it will make everything else easier. But then again, logistics are very difficult, and sometimes you're at the mercy of weather, of time, companies and stuff. It's got to be stressful. Like he said, Formula One is awesome, and it's a lot of money, and it's one of the biggest entertainment forms in the world. But I imagine for the teams involved, it can be very, very stressful.
Proves a more daunting logistical challenge as teams only have 3 full days to break down, transport, and reassemble their equipment at the new race site.
My goodness.
Even worse, for the first time ever, the 2018 season saw 3 weekends with 3 races in a row. On June 24th, the French Grand Prix took place in Le Castellet, then the next weekend the Austrian one was held in Spielberg, finishing off the following weekend with the British Grand Prix in Silverstone. The Austria-UK transfer was the most difficult one as it involved driving nearly 1,000 miles, including through the choke point of the Channel Tunnel. For this trek, each truck was manned by 3 drivers so that while one drove, the others could sleep in an RV.
Can we appreciate this unit right here? Look at this Red Bull Racing, this setup here. This is what we call a semi-truck. I think maybe in at least the UK, you guys say lorries, I think I've heard. Big rigs, whatever you guys call them. But yeah. Beautiful truck. I mean, the trailer is just perfect looking, clean, painted perfectly. I mean, that is a sharp looking unit there. Getting there in style for sure. And I'm not surprised, right? They seem to go all out.
That way, the trucks could drive continuously, only stopping to refuel. But again, these races are easy logistically compared to the ones outside of Europe, the ones known as flyaway races.
Oh, man.
Just like with the European races, a majority of flyaway races occur with 2 weeks between them, but from time to time, races are scheduled on back-to-back weekends thousands of miles apart.
Ooh,
these back-to-back flyaway races are the most logistically difficult weeks of the Formula One season. On Sunday, April 8, 2018, the Bahrain Grand Prix was held in Sakhir, Bahrain. Then 7 days later, the following weekend, the Chinese Grand Prix was held in Shanghai, China. Over 4,000 miles separated those 2 racetracks, and yet, just like with every race, everything came down on Sunday night in Bahrain and had to be operational by Thursday morning in China.
Oh my
Even worse,
God.
Shanghai is 5 hours ahead of Bahrain, which is effectively 5 hours fewer to do the work.
Oh.
But in reality, the planning for this transfer began months before. Around
That's
January
insanity,
2018,
man.
3 months before the first races of the season, each of the 10 teams packed up 5 sets of shipping containers. Each of these sets held their sea kit, carrying things like chairs, tables, appliances, cooking utensils, and some elements of their garages.
Wow.
They send these bulkier and less expensive pieces of equipment by sea, as it's massively less expensive than sending them by plane. The number of containers per team varies, as the wealthier teams like Red Bull will take more, but in general each team takes about 3 40-foot containers. Of course, ocean shipping is slower, but since there are 5 sets, there is always one at the right place at the right time. That January shipment sent the first 5 kits to the first 5 flyaway races: Melbourne, Australia, Sakhir, Bahrain, Shanghai, China, Baku, Azerbaijan, and Montreal, Canada. Then, as each race was completed, its kit was packed up and sent to the next flyaway race destination without a kit. The Australian one went to Singapore, the Bahraini one to Russia, the Chinese one to Japan, the Azerbaijani one to the United States, and the Canadian one to Mexico. And then towards the end of the season, when there are no more tracks to send kits to, they're sent back to the team's home bases for the winter. At the racetrack, the Formula One logistics team's main downtime is actually during the race itself, but for the Bahrain to China transfer, real work began the Thursday before the race. That's when each team's logistics manager started making their teardown plan, deciding in which order and into which containers their different pieces of equipment should go. Once that was completed, there really was not a lot to do until Sunday. On Sunday morning, before the race even started, the pack-up began. Many of the spare parts can't be used during the race. They're not going to replace an engine during the Grand Prix, so they're the first pieces of kit to be packed into their containers. Not much.
I was going to say, some major things, of course, that they can't use or swap during the race. I imagine you have a race on Sunday, and I guess it makes perfect sense that you would be packing up some stuff, possibly during the race, like on race day, already getting ready for the next week. You just kind of got to be on top of stuff that much. I tell you what, this is just super fascinating. Logistics, when you're talking about big companies, if we're talking about like big companies, like at least here in the U.S., for like shipping, like FedEx, UPS, Amazon. We don't really use DHL, but I think maybe in Europe and I don't know, maybe in Australia, do you guys use DHL? Those companies blow my mind too, how you can order something and it can come from anywhere and get to your house relatively quickly. I think that's amazing in itself. But this is on almost the same level. I mean, you're dealing with an extremely expensive, in-demand motorsport that has a tight schedule. The fact that they can get it done, get it to the right place on time, week after week after week, or every 2 weeks, and not have stuff get lost and broken, it's crazy. It is crazy, and it's part of the appeal of how epic this is to learn about. It also makes you appreciate the level of competition that's in this sport.
Much happened during the race itself, but within 15 minutes of it ending, the main pack-up began. The cars, the most important pieces of equipment, were subjected to a post-race inspection to be sure no illegal modifications were made, but everything else was immediately ready for packing. All the equipment that the teams wanted at the destination first were put into one of 3 priority pallets. Together, each team's priority pallets filled up the first plane to Shanghai. As soon as these were packed, they were driven directly to the airport only a few hours after the race ended to be prepared for the early morning flight to Shanghai.
Wow.
As that plane took off, the final pallets were being packed up back at the racetrack. Only about 6 to 8 hours after the drop of the checkered flag, all pallets were packed up and on their way to the airport. By midday Monday, all 6 of the Boeing 747s used to transport the team's equipment to China were in the air. These planes were chartered by Formula One, but the teams still pay for the space. Also on Monday, all the staff started their journey to Shanghai. Many of the lower-level staff just flew on normal commercial flights, while some of the higher-profile drivers flew private between the 2 countries. After 9 hours in the air, the first plane touched down in Shanghai around early evening local time.
Jeez.
The freight was unloaded and brought to customs. By midnight, all the priority freight was on its way to the racetrack. Overnight, logistics workers arranged the different teams' freight into their respective paddocks. No team is allowed to touch their freight until all the other teams' freight has arrived, both for fairness purposes and safety to assure that there aren't many people around as pallets are being unloaded and moved. By Tuesday morning, it's game on for the assembly crews. At this point, each team had their 3 priority pallets and their C-kit. In their priority pallets, teams didn't put the highest value or most important cargo, they put the things they needed to assemble first, the bare bones of their garage. That includes the wall paneling, the core of their electrical system, and the majority of the IT and communications equipment. By Tuesday evening, that build was done, and the track was once again made inaccessible to the teams as the non-priority pallets were delivered overnight. Early Wednesday morning.
Yeah, let me say again, too, this speaks to how many people, this is something I had no idea about before learning about the sport. How many people work for these teams, for each Formula One team. It's crazy when you think about not only is it the driver and, a crew chief and, the mechanics, right? It's just so much more. It's so much more than that. Obviously, they have to have people in charge of logistics and people that how much or how big, rather, of a team does it take to have all this stuff unloaded and organized and assembled and then disassembled and repacked and dude, it sounds like a headache. It sounds like a nightmare, honestly.
Around 6 a.m., the teams arrived back at the track and began work on the final assembly of the garage. Only after about 4 hours, by late morning, all the different teams' garages were operational. All in all, 10 Formula One teams successfully packed up, shipped all their equipment 4,000 miles, and reassembled their paddocks in 58 hours. Thanks to careful planning and practiced workers, Formula One pulls off this impressive feat every year without a hitch. Earlier in the video, I mentioned how the short 7-day Spielberg...
Yeah, that is actually the end of the video there. Can we appreciate the screenshot here of the track and the beautiful mountains there? What a gorgeous setting. Well, what can I say other than the obvious? Those were insane logistics. I can't even wrap my head around it, honestly. I almost hate to say it, but I can understand why, tickets to go see F1 races are expensive because it is just... If we're talking about racing, I gotta admit, right? For one, I'm glad that there's so many different kinds of motorsports, and that's what I like. I like learning about a lot. I like watching different motorsports of different varieties, different kinds, and different levels. But I really have to admit, whenever I think about it, there's just nothing like F1. Nothing even close. NASCAR's not even close. Indy versus F1, it's so funny. When I was a kid, of course, I everyone's heard of F1. I may not have known anything about it, but, when you're younger, IndyCar versus F1, just because they're both, somewhat similar looking. But no, like there's no comparison. Like F1 is just, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. I don't know how else to describe it. The fact that they can do that all season long and cross all these continents and all these tracks with different terrains, and they get everything in order is truly a spectacle. But you know what? As a spectator and as motorsports fans across the world, hey, I appreciate it. I'm glad they do it, right? It's awesome. I mean, at the end of the day, we benefit from it. It's really cool to see. And all I got to do is catch up with most of the world and watch some freaking F1 more. I really got to do that. I still have a movie or two on my list that I got to watch that I think would really immerse me in the Formula One world. And then, of course, I need to just start watching the races. That would be great. Highlight videos are nice, but when I mean watch races, I want to watch, a live race. But in conclusion, guys, I would love to hear from you down in the comments. Tell me your thoughts, anything you would like to weigh in and add on to this, and how mind-blowing is this to you, how this motorsport really, really works. Please throw a thumbs up, a like on this video if you enjoyed it and learned something. It will really help it out. I do appreciate it. Of course, you can subscribe to join one of the best communities on YouTube, and we're on our way to 100,000 subscribers. Please help us get there. And like I said, check that description for this original video where you can watch the whole thing uninterrupted, and you can browse their channel, as well as other ways you can interact with mine, support mine. The Discord's down there, things like that. Okay, my name is Ian. You're watching IWrocker. Until next time, guys, I'll catch you later.